אני חושב עד...
בבוסטון יורד שלג עכשיו,
יופי.
אז אנחנו שמחים להיות פה.
So I'm going to be leading us in the opening part of the service as people are getting on. And we're going to invite people to mute, or people can be muted by our host, and then unmute. I'll unmute myself if you want to do that, Khazan.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just offer as a kavanah, as a meditation for this opening part of the davening, and to invite you just to take a moment to close your eyes for a moment, to get 2 feet on the ground, perhaps, where you're seated, to take a breath as you inhale and exhale. Inhale, exhale. And you might be in a place where, if you look out the window, you will see that there's been snow on the ground for quite a while, and maybe you're starting to see patches of where there is grass or things that you can see where the snow has been melted for the last few days, and you can remember that in this time of winter, that beneath the ground is a miraculous process in which the beginning of life that is going to be bursting forth as we get ready to come to Chag HaAviv. Just 4 weeks, Passover will be here, marking the beginning of spring and the beginning of life. And if we just remember that even when things are not obvious to our eyes when we look out, that there are always processes that are hidden underground, sometimes below the earth, in which life is happening, growth is possible, and growth will emerge even when we don't yet see the blossoms. And so this Shabbat, the Shabbat after Purim, I want to invite us to just reflect for a moment before we begin our davening on the unseen parts of our lives, to think about that which is present even when we don't always see it. The love that surrounds us, love of family and friends and community, and God's love. And to remind ourselves that there's so much more that is happening beyond just what we are seeing with our eyes. And that we'll reflect a little bit later on the Purim story and the fact that God is not present by name in that entire Megillah. And yet God's presence is constantly operating behind the scenes of the narrative, just as God is constantly operating in our own lives. And so as we begin these prayers of our morning service, whose goal is to help us to become aware of the miracle of our lives and of God's presence, let us dedicate ourselves just in this time to seeing a little bit more clearly that which is sometimes hidden from view. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta b'nishmati v'chemla, Rabba emunatecha. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta b'nishmati v'chemla, Rabba emunatecha, Rabba emunatecha, Rabba emunatecha. Our neshama is with us at all times. We give thanks to God for that gift and for the ability to perceive it animating our lives. Ma tovu, how good it is that we are together. Ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkeno techa Yisrael, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkeno techa Yisrael. Speaking of miracles unseen, our bodies are perhaps the greatest daily reminder of the unseen miracles of God's presence. So I invite you to join with me in the words of the bracha on page 63 for the gift of our bodies. It's so interesting how sometimes the miracle of our bodies working doesn't reveal itself to us as being real until they stop working. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? But this bracha, yeah, it's a miracle. We just have to open our eyes. Join with me, page 63. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvaravo nekavim chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisot kavodecha, she'im yipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים ולעמוד לפניך. We say we praise you, God, the healer of our flesh, Rofei chol v'asar mafli laso, the one who keeps our bodies working in wondrous ways. Page 63, the gift of our soul, again, which is always with us. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. Elohai neshama shenata tabi tehora tehorai. You know, I'm doing a class on tefillah, and one of the themes is that we have so many words in our tradition, especially on Shabbos morning, that it's really hard. It's really hard because there's so many. So I have an exercise for you. It's time for Birkat HaShachar, but I actually I'm going to just do the opening bracha, and I really want you to just spend a few moments and find one bracha that you can say with real kavanah, whether it's the fact that you are asking God to provide for some needs that you really feel like you have. If you're feeling a little bit down and blue, you'll ask God to help raise us if we're down and blue. If there are things that you feel like you haven't been seeing in your life, you'll ask God to give sight to the blind. Just find one bracha that's really like resonating for you today, and meditate on that as we invite people who wish to please rise. Page 64, the Birkot HaShachar. I'll just start with the first one and leave some time for quiet for people to find their bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech livina, lahavchin ven yom uven laila. I'm going to conclude with the bracha that's really resonating for me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten li'ayef koach. Turn with me, if you will, to page 81. And one of the issues that a member of our congregation was making in a class that I was involved in was the whole idea of compassion. What is compassion? Compassion is not just about somehow solving a problem for someone who might have less than we do. Compassion is a stance towards the world in which we acknowledge that to be human is to know pain at times. And because we understand pain of our own lives, we understand pain of our own historical experience as Jews, that because we understand pain and suffering, we are able to have a sense of compassion for those who are suffering and for our own suffering. And here in Psalm 30, what the psalmist helps us to understand is that we all suffer, and yet we're surrounded by a God of love who, when we are suffering, reaches out to us just as our mother reaches out to us as a child when we are suffering and in pain. Page 81, 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai ozer li. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai ozer li. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai ozer li. Hafachta mispidi l'macholi pitachta saki v'ta'azreni simcha man yizmercha chava v'lo yidam Adonai Elohai le'olam odecha. I want to invite those who are saying Kaddish to unmute themselves and to join with me. Page 82, Mourner's Kaddish.
Yeah.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabba Yamad
Yivrak Giratei V'yamlich Malchutei V'chayechon V'yimechon V'chayei Kol Beit Yisrael V'gala V'zman Kari V'yamru Amen. Hey Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Olmei Amaya Yibarach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yiroman V'yimaseh V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha brichu le'elam mikol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechata damiran b'alma v'yimru Amen. Hey Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mamav Aseh Shalom Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael V'yamru Amen.
If you're able to rise, please do so. Page 83. God, you create worlds with words, and so might we, if we use them for your glory and for your goodness. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch hu. Baruch Oseh Bereshit. Baruch Omer V'Hosem. Baruch Ozer U'Mekayim. Baruch Merachem al haaretz. Baruch Merachem al habriot. Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov L'Rehav. Baruch Ha'ilad V'Kayam Lanetzach. Baruch Odehu Matzil. Baruch Shema. Yachid Keholamim. Melech Mishubach U'Vradyat Shemo HaGadol. Baruch Atah Adonai. Melech Mecholal. Vatishbacho. I want to invite you to be seated. We're going to turn ahead to page 96. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yahalalucha Salah. What does it mean to be someone who perceives oneself as having riches, having enough, not material riches, spiritual riches? It's being able to sit in God's house. God's house is any place that we are in which we let God in, and to be able to have gratitude for that which is around us. Sitting in your house, God, just the mere act of being is that which can give us contentment, and that which for which we can have gratitude. Page 96. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yahalelucha. Od Yahalelucha Selah. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yahalelucha. Od Yahalelucha Selah. May our mouths praise you, God. May all of your creations praise your name throughout all time, because we will praise you, God, and bless you for all the many gifts that we are given. Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi Yarech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Vahed Va'anachnu Nevarech Yah Me'ata v'ad olam. Hallelujah. So a kavanah on hiddenness and revealing and being aware of that which is not obvious. So we are Shabbat came right at the end of the day of Purim, and Purim is a meditation in many ways. Among many of its messages, one of its messages on how we reveal that which is hidden. And that is very directly related, or revealed, I should say, in the name of the primary text that we read on Purim, Megillat Esther. Megillah comes from the same shoresh, the same root as legalot, which is to reveal. And Esther, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 31, God says, Va'anochi haster astir panai. And to the extent that we don't live with awareness of God and response to God's presence, God says that I will hide my face, I will hide my presence from you. So Esther, the star of our show, the heroine of the book, her name means that which is hidden. And what we know about the book of Esther is that there is one very important character who is hidden in the entire book, and that is God. God is not mentioned even once in the entire Megillah. And yet we know that God's presence is felt so clearly in this book. And we know that that's the God that we know. The one that is not we don't know the God who is the one who is splitting the seas and leading us to freedom, or revealing the Torah at Sinai. We know the God who is the God of the book of Esther, the one who is the driving force, but all behind the scenes in a way that is not always obvious. So there's another person who is not mentioned in this week's parashah, who's the driving force for the entire Torah, and that is Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu is also not mentioned in this week's parashah, and yet we know that Moshe's presence is so deeply felt in this entire Torah, and particularly in what's going on right now in the construction of the Mishkan. And this whole idea that we are constantly living in a world in which that which is present is not readily seen is something that I think the opening command about a command that we must create a ner tamid, an eternal light, as a reminder of God's presence, is really one of the driving forces behind that command, is really about this whole dynamic of trying to keep mindful awareness of that which is not always easily seen. When our ancestors created a ner tamid, it was not something that happened when they plugged an electric socket into a long-lasting light bulb that could sit above an Aron Kodesh and have a light bulb that wouldn't need to be changed for 5 years. It was a painstaking process to make the oil that would be refined and clear enough that could be lit for that reminder of God's presence. And also there was the fire that needed to be tended each and every day by the Kohanim in order to make sure that that light would never go out. And one of the messages that I think that we have about this idea of that which is often hidden needs to be revealed is that some of us think about the process of feeling God's presence and sensing God's presence as something that might happen to us in a moment, where if we just happen to go to a beautiful enough mountain or a vast enough ocean, that's how we'll see God's presence. But what I think the Ner Tamid reminds us of is that revealing the presence of the divine in our lives is something that happens because we are tending to that presence each and every day. That we are opening ourselves up to God's presence. We're looking for God's presence each and every day. Some of us look for it through the prayers that we recite. Some of us look for God's presence through the love we try to give to the people in our lives who matter, or to try to do mitzvot, and to try to help those who are in need. Part of how we feel God's presence and bring God into the world is not just by waiting for somehow God to come and reveal God's self, as it were, to us by putting us in front of a beautiful sunset as the ocean, as we watch it set over the ocean, which of course is a beautiful thing. But part of what the Ner Tamid, I think, reminds us of is that it takes tending to our neshamot each and every day in order to make space for God to reveal God's self. And so in a world in which we won't have God coming to us through the splitting of seas or the bringing of plagues or the thunder and lightning that was part of the revelation of Torah at Sinai, part of what we hope to do is to find God's presence through how we tend to our own souls, through the ways in which we make room for God's presence, that we actively seek God's presence each and every day. So that light of that Ner Tamid burns bright for each one of us and allows us to be God's hands in a world in which we are the vehicles for bringing God here. May we each be part of revealing, may we be part of the process of revealing God's presence in this world each and every day. Shabbat Shalom. Service will conclude, the Sukkot Zimra is going to conclude with Nishmat Kol Chai on page 104. Nishmat Kol Chai Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Ilufinu Malei Shira Kayam L'Shonina Nehalel Chamshavechacha Nefaracha Nevarech et Shem Kodshecha Ka'amur David Barchi Nafshi et Adonai V'chol Kravai et Shem Kodsho Ha'el V'tatzumot Uzecha Hagadol B'chvod Shemecha Hagibor L'netzach V'nov N'orotecha HaMelech HaYoshev Al Kisei Ram V'Nisan.
Yasher Koach to Rabbi Glanzberg-Krainin on speaking about what is hidden and on kindling the flame within us. We continue now with open hearts on page 105, Shochen Ad.
Shochen Ad Marom V'kadosh Shemo V'kadurenu tzadikim b'Adonai L'yisharim navat tehila B'fi yisharim tithalal Divrei tzadikim titparach ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. ומקלות הרביבות תמכה בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור. שכן חובת כל יצורים לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות לשבח, לפאר לרומם, להדר לברך, להלל ולקלס, על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך.
Please rise, Yishtabach, page 106.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לחננו אלינו ואבותינו שירו. ברכות גדולות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני למלך גדול בתשבחות להודות אדוני נפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך מלכי העולמים.
Amen.
יתקדש ויתקדש שם רבה.
אמן.
ולמד דברי קירותי ולניק מלכותי בחייכון ומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגאלה וישרים.
I can see him.
יש שם רבה מבורך לעולם לעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר לנו ונשא ויתעזר ותעלל שמי דקודשה. וכולם מקום וירשעות שירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן ויעלמה ויאמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Ba'ed.
ברוך המבורך לעולם עד. ברוך אתה לעולם יוסר אור וחושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. הכל יודוך והכל ישבחוך. ומעולם כולו. מאז סור ומסכבד כנשאר. כי ארכן בעולם הזה, ויזודך מלאכנו, לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתי חגורנו לימות המשיח, אינו מלך מושיענו, לתחיית המתים.
Please daven, sing with us, El Adon 108.
אל אדון על כל המעשים, ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו. המתגאה על חיות הקודש, ולדר בכבוד על המרכבות, זכות ומישור לפני כיסו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו. טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יסם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם, להיות מושלים בקרב תבל. אלים זיו ומפיקים בנוגה, רסיבם בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים בהמה רצון קונם. וירא וכבוד הנותנים לשמו, צולה ברינה זכר מלכותו. קרא לשמש ויזרח חור, רע והתקין צורת הלבנה. שבעת נותנים לו גזבה מרום, תפארת וגדולה שרפים אופנים וחיות הקודש.
109.
אלא ששבת מכל המעשים בהם השביעי, שב כסוי כבודו. לפחי ברוך היקר, שבח יקר גאול אל מלך יוצר כל, ביום שבת קודש שמך אדוני אלוהינו יקדש. יום יור שעשית יפרוך הסלע, תתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו, בורא קדושים ישתבח שמך מלכנו יוצר משפטנו. כולם אוהבים, כולם מרורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהמה וביראה רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובתורה בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ובשבחים, פאורים מריצים מקדישים וממליכים את שמה אל המלך הגדול הגיבור ונורא קדוש הוא. כולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות לזה להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ונימה קדושה. כולם כאחד עולים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. והאופנים והיות הקודש ברעש קדום יסינו שרפים, ומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך אדוני ממקומו. ברוך נבות ייתנו למלך הקי וקיים זמורת ומרוב תשבחות ישמיעו, כי הוא לבדו פה וכאורותו עושה חדשות בעד מלחמות זורקים. ולחדש הציון תאיר, נזכה כולנו מהרה ליורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. אמר אבותינו אדוני אלוהינו כמנה גדולה ויתרחם למען עלינו. אבינו מלכנו ועבור אבותינו. וירננו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבנו יבואו ירא את שמך ולא נבוש לעולם ועד ולא נבוש לעולם ועד כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך ואבינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ את הוליכנו גוממיות לארצנו כי בוא ישועתה ובאנו בקרתך מכל ולשון וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך ביחד ברוך אתה אדוני הבוקר ביעמו ישראל ויבוא שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ברוך שם כבוד אותו לעולם יעבד את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך היו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך והיה אם שמוע תשמעו על מצוותי אשר אנוכי מצוותכם היום לאהבה היום ישמרו לכם בנפתחם
אצל הנביאים האחרים ישתחוו גם להם והראה אדוני באוצרת השמיים
וקשרתם אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם כי מהשמיים על הארץ ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תקלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תדורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue in the middle of 113.
אמת ויציב נחום וקיים וישר נאמנו וחביב. דור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לקיימת, ודבריו חיים וקיימים, נאמנים נחמדים לעד ולעולמי עולמים, על אבותינו ועלינו על הראשונים ועל האחרונים, דבר טוב וקיים עליו ועד אמת כזו. אמת שאדון עלינו ולאבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור שובתנו, בדם הצילנו, ולמשימך אין אלוהים זולתך. עזרת אבותינו עדה ומעולם, מגן מושיע לבניכם אחריכם בכל דור ודור, ברום עולם. אמת אתה הוא אדון לעמך, אמת אתה הוא ראשון ואתה הוא אחרון, אין לנו מלך גואל מושיע. בים סוף בקעת, רם נישא גדול ונורא משפיל. תהילות אל היום מלך ומבורך, משה בני ישראל לקנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ויאמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך בעדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים יחד, עולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Please rise.
צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופלג נאומך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We continue now on 115b with the Amidah, where we use both the words that are written here, but also the kavanah that is in our heart. 115b.
Adonai Zevadai Tiftach Ufiagi Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Eloi Avotenu, Eloi Avraham, Eloi Yitzchak, Eloi Yaakov, Eloi Sarah, Eloi Rivka, Eloi Rachel, Eloi Leah, El Gadol HaGibor HaNorah, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chazei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei Lehem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גאולם אדוני, מקיים מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מקלקל חיים בחסד, מקיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נוחים ורופא חולים, הוא אדיר אסורים, הוא מקיים אמונתו בשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, חיי ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן על הקריות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני לחיי המתים
מקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמעתי שמותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמעתי שמותו בו בשמי מרום, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, בני סמלון וצרפים, למותם ברוך יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו, מדוביה, ותמלוך עלינו, כמחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך, תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. תשכון, תתקדש ותתקדש ירושלים, עירך לדור ולנצח נצחים. עינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדברמו שירי עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד כל עליך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מבינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אלה מלך גדול, כי אלה מלך גדול, וקדוש אתה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We continue till the end of the Amidah, page 120.
כמו שלאת כל נאמן קראת לו.
Kaddish Shalem 138.
יתכתב ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה קירותי ונמחותי, בחייכון ומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה וזכרי וימרו, אמן. ישמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעלמי עמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ותרמה ותנשא, ויתהדר ותעלה ותעלה לשם קודשה.
Brichu.
בריחו למקום וכתב ושירתה, תושבחתה ונקמתה, דאמירם ביעלמה וימרו, אמן. תתקרבה כל דבר ותהון, דכל ישראל קודם ובהון, דבישמי וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
יש לנו רב משמעיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ירו, אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
139. Ein Kamocha.
כמוך ואלוהים אדוני, וכמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, ובמשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני מלוך לעולם אחד. אדוני עוז למו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. הרחמים היטיב ברצונך את ציון. יבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך רם ונישא אדון העולמים.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. As Rabbi GK noted, we are now going from the redemption of Purim to the ultimate redemption of leaving Egypt. And we are in our Torah reading cycle where we get to learn about how to really design spaces of worship that bring in God's presence. And then when we're not in those spaces of worship, how we bring God's presence into our own selves. We're going to listen to some Torah reading. First, please turn in your Eitz Chaim volume to page 503 for the beginning of the parasha. If you are using a different version of the Chumash, we are at the beginning of Parashat Tetzaveh, which is Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. Listen for the words that you know.
ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו מצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה.
Amen.
ואתה תצווה את בני ישראל, ויקחו אליך שמן זית זך, כתית למאור, לעלות נר תמיד.
And teach the Israelites to bring you clear oil of olives for lighting, an eternal lamp that will be lit regularly.
באוכל מועד, מחוץ לפרוכל, אשר העדות יערוך. אותו אהרון ובניו, מערב עד בוקר, לפני אדוני, חוקת עולם לדורותם, מאת בני ישראל.
And for all time it shall be a rule and a law for the Jewish people. Aaron and his children shall go to the tent of meeting outside the curtain which is over the ark, and will burn this lamp of eternity each evening and each morning with regularity.
הקרב אליך את אהרון אחיך ואת בניו איתו מתוך בני ישראל, לקחנו לי אהרון נדב ואביהו, אלעזר ואיתמר בני אהרון.
Bring forward your brother Aaron and his sons, Nadav and Avihu, who will later mess this all up, Eleazar and Itamar, the sons of Aaron.
ועשית בגדי קודש לאהרון אחיך לכבוד ולתפארת.
And now we learn about the idea of Hidur Mitzvah. Make beautiful clothing for your brother Aaron, so that there is dignity and there is beauty and adornment.
ואתה תדבר אל כל חכמי לב, אשר מלהיטיב רוח חוכמה, ועשו את בגדי אהרון לקדשו לכחנו לי.
Next, you shall now understand there are many kinds and ways of being smart, and Chacham Lev is one of them. It's translated in our Torah as skillful, but Chacham Lev really means wise of heart. So those who are skillful and do their deeds from the heart, they are the ones who shall make Aaron's consecrated clothing.
אשר יעשו חושק ואפוד ומעיל וכתונת תשבץ מצנפת ואבנת ועשו בגדי קודש לאהרון אחיך ולבניו לקחנו לי.
This is the clothing that they shall make: a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, and a fringed tunic, a headdress, and a sash. You and they shall make these for your brother Aaron, for the priestly service to me, as a reminder that we should dress for the occasion.
והם יקחו את הזהב ואת התכלת ואת הרגמן ואת תולעת השני ואת השש.
And to all those who appreciate color, texture, and beauty, so does our Torah. Therefore, you shall receive gold and linen and blue and purple and crimson yarn, and you shall make what you wear beautiful. Such beautiful mitzvot that we hear about here. We hear about the Ner Tamid, which we'll talk about in a few moments, but we hear also about this idea of being Chacham Lev, having a skill that you do from the heart. And I think each one of us know the difference. You can be skilled at something, but not be doing it from your heart. Chacham Lev is you have some wisdom and that your heart is in it. And that is when we serve God and when we serve others, we are asked in this Torah reading to do so from a heart place, a place both of skill and wisdom, and that comes from our mind. Sforno, the commentator, says from your brain, but also from your innermost feelings. This also gives a little kudos to the fashion industry, which reminds us that I think a lot of us have been wearing sweatpants for the last year, and that every once in a while you might want to feel like you dress up for shul for the occasion, or change your mood by saying that something is holy. At Camp Ramah, I think many of you who've been there will know that kids used to be asked to wear, and sometimes they still are, white shirts for Shabbat, or at least for Friday night. Something to get you in the mood of sanctity. And I think each of us can feel that sometimes through this year of wearing nothing, not dressing up, no makeup, ladies, nothing, that once in a while you do want to get dressed up and say, I want to bring beauty into the world. Before we continue with our prayers for those who are ailing and ill, I'd like to give some words of Torah now as opposed to later, because we're right at the portion that I want to talk about. Okay, I've been here with you for 17 years, or almost, me and Rabbi GK. But there are probably some things you still don't know about either of us. Here's one of them. I was a brownie, and Michael Furman's mom was my brownie leader. And I was a Girl Scout. If you were a Boy Scout, you learned how to build a fire. If you were a Girl Scout in the late 70s, you learned how to sew or sell cookies. That's what the badges were for. I always wanted to learn how to make the fire. And especially when I was at camp and I saw the Israeli scouts build their big midurot, their big campfires, or the fire signs. We never had a fireplace growing up, but I always wanted one. And when I moved into my home 11 years ago, I was so excited that it had a fireplace. But I kind of wanted the one with the flip switch where gas would just immediately ignite the fire and it would look pretty. That's not what I got. Instead, I got a friend from the congregation who taught me how to build a fire, something I should have learned in Girl Scouts. I think they learn it now. So this friend from the congregation first brought me to their home, and I watched them as they built fires. I learned that there are so many elements to a good fire. First and foremost, open the flue. How many of you with a fireplace have made that mistake of not opening the flue? Yep, everyone's got their hands up. Crucial then is dry wood, and wood with a nice scent. A good starter, long matches so you don't burn yourself. And then I learned that the actual alignment of where you place the logs is important. But probably most important, you need to know when and how to tend the fire. You need to move the logs, but not too soon, because if you disrupt the logs, if you move the logs too soon, you'll disrupt the creation of a great blaze. But if you wait too long to add a log or add it in the wrong place, you'll have to rebuild that fire from scratch. If you want to have a fire that continually burns, you need to tend it. You can't walk away. I learned that from John and Marcel Bate. You got to be there tending the fire. Parashat Tetzaveh teaches, you shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly, to make a ner tamid. V'ata tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael v'chu elecha o elayich shemen zayit zak ketit la'ma'or lahalot ner tamid. To make a ner tamid. This eternal light would illuminate God's holy dwelling space, even when it was dark, even when there was fear, even when the Jewish people felt vulnerable. We continue this practice in our synagogues, having a symbolic light that is always lit to show us God's constancy and to bring light when we only can feel darkness. I assume that some of you have felt darkness in this past year. Yes, there have been great things. Some of you have gotten to spend more time with your adult children who've moved back in. And some of you have gotten to learn a new hobby or just to learn to slow down. But there has been much darkness, and there have been over 500,000 deaths just in our country. So what is this metaphor of tending a light and bringing light where there is darkness? And how can it help us today? Because God surely does not need the light in the temple or in the tabernacle, but I do, and you do. So first, what does the word ner tamid mean? Ner, light. As Rabbi GK explained earlier, and as I just noted, this ner in the Torah is made with olive oil that took a while to create. It had to be clear and it had to be pure. When we use wood for a fire, it has to also be dry and specific to what we want to use it for. Tamid is a more complicated word. Does it mean always? Or does it mean with regularity? Do I have to have a ner tamid, a light that burns twice a day, always, with regularity? Or does there need to be a light lit all the time? And if the light is lit all the time, how do we achieve that if we're not using just an electric switch? But more important, how do we achieve that light if the light that we are talking about is not only the light in the Mishkan and in the temple, but the light within us? Let me teach you a brief Gemara from Menachot. The Gemara discusses this lighting, this candelabrum, and other aspects of the temple. And the verse states, command the children of Israel, make yourself refined pounded oil for illumination, to kindle the lamps continually. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, God tells the Jewish people the oil should be taken for yourself, to indicate that it is not for the benefit of God. God says in the Gemara, I do not need the light. Similarly, in the Gemara, I don't need your showbread or anything else you bring. Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Elazar say, God says to the Jewish people, I do not require the candelabrum for its illumination. I, God, can see without it. Why then do we need to do it? To teach ourselves that we need to be kindling the light of Torah within us. With regard to the temple built by King Solomon, the verse says, and King Solomon made for the house windows that were narrow and broad. But the sages taught, the rabbis taught, that typically windows are constructed to widen toward the inside in order that the light from the outside should be dispersed throughout the room. In the temple, God said, no, make the windows narrow within and broad without, because I don't require illumination. On the contrary, the light of the temple is to be radiated outwards. And the light of you and of each human being is to come from within us and to be radiated outwards. This week, on the secular calendar, this coming week, will mark the 1 year of very little being regular or tamid in our lives. What has seemed most regular about living in a time of pandemic is that we had to quickly get used to the idea that very little is as it was. In the last year, we have all had to find ways to bring light into a dark time. And so many of you have done just that. Read the article in The Exponent this week about how some of our preschool moms are getting vaccines for our congregants. Such a light they've brought into this world. What's the light that you bring in the world? And what helps you bring that light in the world? What is the tamid, the regularity of doing, of action in your life that helps you kindle the light that is within you? Because the light is for us. It is a metaphor for how we can bring light into the world. So the question of the Ner Tamid essentially is, how does the regular performance of mitzvot bring light into the world or into your life? And what is tamid? Is it always, and is it with regularity? Jewish life, I would say, is about adding elements of regularity in our practice of mitzvot. so that the flame in our nishamot, in our souls, will burn continually. In Proverbs chapter 6, verse 24, we learn the verse, Ner mitzvah v'torah or. Ki ner mitzvah, the mitzvah, the doing of Jewish actions and of commandments will be the ner, the light that will light each one of us up. And mitzvot are intended to be done with regularity. V'torah or, and Torah, learning it and doing it, are the light that we bring and that is brought to us. Mitzvah or commandment is a lamp. The teaching of Torah is a light. If we want to have light and joy emanate from our beings, just like we heard in the Megillah, we need to engage in more mitzvot, in more Jewish actions, and live Torah. We need to do this with a regularity of practice. Now, you are the ones who come every week, so you have a regularity of practice. What other elements of your practice, of your life, can now be imbued with tamid, with always, with regularity of mitzvot? This past week, my chavrutzas and I were studying the Mishnah about when we recite the Shema. And we were noting that the nature of saying Shema is that Shema is not a prayer. It is a pledge of allegiance. It is done with regularity in the morning and in the evening. It is a ritualized way each morning and night to state who we are as Jews, and that our jobs as Jews are via hafta, to love God and to love each other and to do mitzvot. So in addition to attending services each Shabbat, what are other mitzvot, other commandments that you can commit to doing in a regular way, that you can add to your lives in a way that is tamid, regular, so that that sense of regularity will kindle the fire, the passion for Judaism, for God, and for Torah within you. The idea of our Torah and of our ancient rabbis is that in creating a system of commanded actions, of mitzvot, that we will have a framework with which to tend the fire, the passion of loving God. That is one of the reasons we are commanded to do mitzvot. Judaism is about our regular but passionate, fiery practice of faith that must burn within us. And faith is hard to maintain. And a fire is hard to maintain. It just must be tended. So we encourage you to think about another mitzvah this week and another one the week after, or come talk to your rabbis. Come talk to us about what new mitzvah you can add with regularity. But now I want to add to you one more idea. I want to end with one more idea about this Ner Tamid. I want to introduce you to an amazing Kabbalist who you know already. His name is Elazar ben Moshe Azkiri. He lived in 1533 to around 1600 in the north of Israel in Tzfat. And he wrote a beautiful poem that you are all familiar with called Yedid Nefesh. But he also wrote a book called Sefer HaCharedim, a book of Kabbalistic, beautiful works. I put in the chat a couple of moments ago the words of the song that I would like to teach you. The words of this song were written by him, by Elazar ben Moshe Azkiri. Bilvavi mishkan evneh. You can find them in the chat. I put it about 10 minutes ago. Bilvavi, in my heart, I will build for you, God, a mishkan, a dwelling place for your Shekhinah, for your in-gathering near to me, nearness, your presence, God. Lahadar kvodo, to bring hidur and beauty and honor for you. I'm not, he's saying, building a temple in Jerusalem. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying, I'm going to build a mishkan, a dwelling place for God, bilvavi, in my lev, in my heart. Uve mishkan mizbeach asim, and in this mishkan, in this dwelling, sacred dwelling place of Shekhinah, God's presence, I will put a mizbeach, an altar. Think about there being an altar in your heart. Lekarnei hodo, to give thanks to you, and to be able to see the rays of splendor that come from you and that come to me or you from you. And here's the word, ulener tamid, and the ner tamid, an eternal light, a ner tamid, an everlasting light, ekachli, I will take for me. Because every mishkan, every place of dwelling of God needs a ner tamid, an eternal light. So where am I going to get that from? The Kabbalist writes, et esh ha'akedah. I am going to get that ner tamid, that eternal light, from the faithful fire from the binding of Isaac. From Abraham's faith that God would provide a ram, something to take the place of his son. Ula korban akriv lo, and I will bring my offering to be close to you, God. And what is that offering? It is my soul and singular soul. Et nafshi hayechida. These beautiful words tell us to build a ner tamid, not in our shuls and not in our homes, but in our hearts. I love his words and I love his melody. Learn it with me if you would. Here's first the melody. Ya na 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 na, ya na ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na. Na 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 na, ya na 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 na. So now please sing this beautiful song with me. Again, I put the words in the chat probably about 10 minutes ago. They're in Hebrew and transliteration. Bilvav mishkan avna Lehadar kivodo, uvemishkan mizbeach hasim, lekarnei hodo, ulener tamid akachli, et eish hakedah. Ulekorban akriv lo et nafshi hayechida. So before we end, think of that one mitzvah you want to add this week. That one action, Jewish action, that ner tamid that will help you tend the passionate fire in your neshama, that will help you celebrate, that will help you make a place for God in your heart and in your soul. Shabbat Shalom. I'll put a recording of this on my Facebook page after Shabbat if you would like to learn it. We now continue with a Misha Berach Licholim, a prayer that Cantor Agar will sing for our loved ones who are ailing and who are ill. But first, take just 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and keep in your head all those who are ailing and all those who are ill. And keep them in your heart as Cantor Agar prays with us and sing with him. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. The source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Feeling with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
say Yishar Kochech to Rabbi Merow on her beautiful Devar Torah. We invite us to turn back to our Sidurim to page 154 as we prepare for the end of the Torah service, the bottom of the page.
Shalom, Lerachecha, Darchei Noam, V'chol netivotecha Shalom. Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu, Kekedem.
We want to invite those of you who are able to rise, if you can, as we continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 155, which will be followed by the Amidah, page 156b. Amen.
Bialmadi v'rakirutei v'nikmalkutei v'chayekon u'v'yomekon u'v'chayei kol Beit Yisrael bagala u'v'zman kariv v'yimeru amen yesh me'raba mevorach לעולם ולעלמי המאיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתבואר את רמה ותנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי קודשה.
ברכו.
לילה מן הכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן ביעלמה וימרוה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, אלוהי לאה, אל הגדול הגיבור הנורא, אל עליון הגומל חסדים הטובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר כזה אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר פקד ומשיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור לעם אדוני, מקיים את אימת הרב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחלק אלוהים בחסד, וחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סובק נופלים ברופאי חולים, ומתיר רצויים, ומקיים באמונתו ראשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומינו מלך, מלך ממית ומקיים, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנת לקחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו.
וחיי המתים.
אמן. נקשיב קודש, המקדישים חינך בקודש, ככתוב ביד נביאך, כרזה אל זה ואמר.
נערצך ונקדישך, ככלסיך שרפי קודש, המקדישים שמה בקודש, ככתוב ביד נביאך וכרזה אל זה ואמר.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה. איה מקום כבודו לאומתם, ברוך יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ממקומו. הוא יפן ברחמים, רחמים, ויחונם היחד עם שמו, ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד, המים יבשמה אומרים.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו, ישמיננו ברחמיו, שני לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ובזיקות שכתוב לאמור.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גואלך, לדור ודור נגיד גואלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך. אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue now as we conclude the Amidah privately, pages 158 through 161.
תיקנת שבת לתיקון טכני.
those of you who are still davening, we want to invite you to continue to do so. The Chazan is going to conclude the Amidah page with Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, Ve'ala kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 Merow. Amen.
Page 181, Kaddish Shalem. Amen.
בעלמא דברה קירותי ונפחותי, בחייכון ומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, הגנה וזמגרי וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
ושמר אבא מבורך, לעולם עולם ועמיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח ותואר ותרם ותעשה, ותדע ותפתנה לשם קודשה.
ברכו.
בריחו להם כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונקמתה, דאמירם ביעלמה וימרו, אמן. יתקבע זאת הון ובאו תהון דכל ישראל קודם ההון נשמע ומרו, אמן. יהי שלום רב משמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ומרו,
אמן.
אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ומרו, אמן.
You're able to remain standing, page 183, Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נותן שמיים וסררת מושנו. אמת מלכנו וזולתו כתוב בידו. כי אתה אלוהים בשמיים. על כן נקבל אחד מאלוהינו לראות ממהרה. יקרו. לכבוד שמך יקרי. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד. ושמו
May be seated. We wanted to just express with sadness that just prior to Shabbat, we learned of the passing of longtime Beth Sholom member Harriet Stein, Zichrona Livracha. Her funeral will be taking place tomorrow afternoon in a private ceremony for her family, but there will be a minyan on Monday night. Harriet was the wife of Ed and the mother of Jeff and Lauren. May her memory be for a blessing. At this time, we want to invite any of you who are in the process of mourning or observing a yard site to please rise and to unmute and to join with Rabbi Merow in Kaddish Atom, the Mourner's Kaddish, page 184.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ילמד יברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. אלמין כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דעם ירן ועלמה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
קבל צלותכון וברכון דכל ישראל קדם אברהון ובשמיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל Israel ואמרו Amen. The God who makes peace on high, send peace and comfort to those of us who are in mourning, and send everlasting rest and peace to our loved ones. Amen.
Amen.
Say Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and thank everyone for being part of our beautiful minyan. One of the wonderful things about going to morning minyan with Larry Chelder as our Rabbi is that he ends every service by thanking everyone for helping to make a beautiful minyan, because every minyan is in fact a beautiful minyan, and it is beautiful to see many of our Beth Sholom family together on Shabbat this morning and on so many Shabbat mornings. I want to thank my colleagues for a beautiful Shabbat, Rabbi Merow for beautiful Torah, and Chazan Agar for leading us in davening this morning. And want to just invite people to just take away a little part of Shabbat from what you may have glimpsed, Rabbi Merow's words about the Ner Tamid and the fire, and what it is that we can do to bring more light to this world through our own actions, and how we can find God's presence more deeply, and to carry that with you after this service has come to an end, and hopefully to find ways to commit to being part of that light in this world. Want to just remind people that tonight Havdalah will be at 6:15 p.m. We hope some of you will be back with us for Havdalah. Tomorrow morning, of course, Shabbat, Sunday morning services at 9. And Rabbi Merow and I will both be virtually attending parts of the Rabbinical Assembly convention this week. So we will both hope to be reinvigorating and regenerating and reconnecting with colleagues from across the world who will all be gathered virtually for the Rabbinical Assembly convention this upcoming week. As always on Sunday, you will be finding many ways to connect with the congregation. There are a few less classes going on this week just because of the convention and the many sessions that we'll be attending at, but we do have a wonderful series of actions that we hope that you will be a part of in this upcoming week. And look Sunday for your Beth Sholom in your home, the weekly email with many activities going on, but I won't go through each individual one right now. If there's anything that Chazan and Rabbi Merow want to highlight, I'll invite them to do that.
If you have a teen who isn't registered for USY convention this weekend, they can still jump on some of the activities. Just have them email Larry, our advisor, because there's a lot of good stuff happening from Havdalah on tonight and all day tomorrow for USY Midwinter Convention. One of the kids from our shul is leading a big panel tomorrow. We're excited that Yael Waxman is leading a big panel tomorrow.
And Kim has posted in the chat some events that are happening in the Kehillah, and I wanted to just again give a shout out to Kim for the amazing amount of work she did on the Purim Carnival, C-A-R in caps. There were hundreds and hundreds of folks from our Old York Road Kehillah that got a little taste of Purim together on the Mandel campus this past Sunday. It was not the organizational pulling that together was no easy feat, let's just put it that way. We also enjoyed seeing a lot of you who came to us on Wednesday this past week for our own Purim drive-through, Beth Sholom. And we raised, just to let people know that we raised over $300 for the Mitzvah Food Pantry as part of Matanot Le'ev Yomim to help support those who are in need. So it was beautiful to see people getting mishloach manot from the congregation and also giving back to our food pantry. And wanted to say that it was a really fun Purim night for all of us. And hope that you were able to partake of Purim and feel a sense of the Purim energy, even as we were in our own homes for Purim. So thanks to all of the staff who put a whole lot of time and energy and work into helping that come together, and to Larry Chelder for leading us as a congregation on Friday morning.
Rabbi, I have one more that I totally forgot, and I apologize, but if you have a child in high school, we believe that most of the Israel programs and camps are going this summer, and parents have been, not sure if they were going or not, but we think USY and the other programs are happening, and certainly Ramah is. And our deadline for Camp and Israel Scholarship was this week, but I really bet that if you got your application in for Camp or Israel Scholarship this coming week, we would still take it because we want your kids to go on an Israel trip or to be at camp. And this could be your kid could be going out of 12th grade even. Spending 6 weeks or 5 weeks in Israel with USY is better than 10 days on a birthright trip. We promise you. More is better, and we really want to help get your child to camp or to an Israel trip.
And also Steve has just put a couple of the men's club events that are really important coming up in chat as well. There's Passover pizza and a pint on March 10th. We'll be talking about 10 best ways to enhance your virtual Seder this year, and also having some pizza and doing some carbo loading before Pesach. And then also we are going to be honoring Avi Minlin as our Beth Sholom representative to the Federation of Jewish Men's Club Men of the Year event taking place on the 14th. And we want to invite you to register for both of those events if you'd like to. And hopefully you'll have received lots of emails that'll tell you how, and we'll continue to do so. Be in touch with Steve if for some reason you haven't gotten that registration link. We're going to conclude with Adon Olam, Chazan, page 187.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרק כל יציר נברא ועת נשא וחפצו כל הזמלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא הוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה הוא אחד ואין שני והמשילו להגבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ועוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חברי ועת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי וכוסי ביום אקרא בידו הפקיד רוחי בעת תישן ויעירה ואם רוחי גבייתי אדון עדי ולא יירא. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And don't forget to check out Don Sable's Purim joke in chat if you want to. Don, the irrepressible Don Sable, always coming to us with something to try to make us chuckle.
At least it was clean.
All right, Chazan, you have a little bit of something for Kiddush. We're gonna invite people to join together in Kiddush, do Hamotzi, spend some time chatting, and wish each other Shabbat Shalom.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם בני ישראל הודאי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו. סברים ענן חבריי,
Chaim.
ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
Chaim. Anyone has anything for which to do hamotzi? Rabbi Merow, you have a little hamotzi?
I could get some. It's not challah, but it's good.
All right. Well, I have my usual trusty challah rolls with me. If anyone wants to
Got
join.
a little Russian black bread.
All right, join with us.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.